Uh, yeah. Okay, I don't think I need to say this, but obviously this video is going to be containing massive spoilers for Tokyo Revengers, as this is going to be a discussion of the current state of the Tokyo Revengers manga. And look, just to make my perspective on the series very clear, I am a fan of Tokyo Revengers. I'm one of the first people to really talk about it on the Anitube scene and bring light to the series, as I thought it was extremely underappreciated, and then it ended up blowing into the mainstream after the anime. Now, with that being said, what are my current thoughts on Tokyo Revengers at the moment? And to really discuss that, we need to go back in time a little bit. And that was no pun intended, but I genuinely thought Tokyo Revengers was a story with a good amount to offer. If I didn't, I wouldn't have talked about it in the way that I did. And I know there's people who just think Tokyo Revengers is doo-doo butt from the beginning. Whatever, that's cool. That's your opinion on the series. But for me, I thought I had a lot of really interesting moments, especially with Taiju's confrontation, all of the stuff that they were trying to do with Mikey's character, the cast of characters, Takemichi being a bit of a unique protagonist, especially within the delinquent manga genre, and even Kasaki just being an overall menace. Now, there is a bit of a turning point after the immense satisfaction of the conflict within Takemichi and Kasaki, and that's when we find out Kasaki's motivations as a character. And it's at that moment where even I went, yeah, I don't know about that one, Chief. And it was around that time where it seemed like we were finally reaching the conclusion of the story that the anime came out and the manga continued. And now, look, if the manga continued due to the giant success of the anime, that's something that I don't really know, and I feel like it would genuinely be dishonest of me to say, oh yeah, for a fact, that's the only reason the manga continued, because I genuinely wouldn't know. Who knows, maybe the author wanted to continue the series the entire time, although I could see why people would draw the conclusion that the only reason the narrative for Tokyo Revengers has continued is due to the massive amount of money that it's going to bring in due to the success of the anime. I understand that perspective. I'm personally not going to jump on that narrative quite yet. It felt like what should have been the big satisfying conclusion to the conflict between Takemichi and Kisaki just ends up being extremely meh. This was built up to be the main antagonist of our story up to this point, and I'm not really happy at all with the way he kind of goes out. And from then on, we seem to focus on this giant conflict with Mikey as a character, and all of these other characters from different gangs that get introduced. This isn't anything new. Anybody who's read more delinquent manga knows that this is something that happens frequently, where other gang members are introduced seemingly out of the blue. However, the goal is to make those characters extremely interesting, therefore the investment is possible. As well, this is something I've seen thrown around a lot with Tokyo Revengers. It's like, oh, these are middle schoolers that look like high schoolers. Bro, just look at other delinquent manga. There's characters that are 16 and 17 that genuinely look like 30, 35-year-old men. It's nothing unique to Tokyo Revengers. So as the story continues onwards, Takemichi has now been able to really save everybody, but now he comes back in the past to help out Mikey and save Mikey. And I understand this message of friendship and wanting to save other people, and I think it's genuinely heartfelt. And as it continues onwards, and now we're around the 220 mark, we then have a giant moment within the series, and that's Draken's death. Now, Draken, however you want to pronounce it, I always switch between the two, I can't bother, is easily one of my favorite characters in the entire series, and he's a fan favorite. And I actually think this is one of the better moments within the series, just because of the sheer emotional value of it. I genuinely got touchy. Like, it had been a while since I had touched Tokyo Revengers, but I went back to catch up and brush up on it yesterday and early today, and honestly, that moment hit me like a truck. Seeing what ends up happening to Draken's character and what he wants Takemichi to do to save Mikey it's beautiful, you know? And I wanted to see how the story would go on from there, because that's at that moment where I go, what's everyone on about? What's the massive explosion? What is the issue? And well, I'll get to that, because after Draken's death, then we see this giant conflict between the gang members and the different respective gangs, actually. And the leader of one of these gangs is this absolute monster. Like, I'm pretty sure he'd put Taiju to shame. That's how much of a monster he is. He's a character, and mind you, these details are going to be important because I'm going to go back to this later. A character who, if I'm not mistaken, beat his own father to death at the age of 12. That's just keep that in mind, right? And that's the birth of what's known as these dark impulses. Or in other words, to make it a little more simple, murderous intent. This character goes through extremely brutal circumstances that awakens his desire to kill and to fight. And these are the same dark impulses that we've seen built up with Mikey throughout the entire story of Tokyo Revengers. So this isn't a concept that was pulled out of nothing, unlike Takemichi being able to see into the future, which either I'm stupid or where did that come from? Regardless, I think at that moment in the story, it's a really good demonstration of dark impulses, and we get some genuinely brilliant panels, in my opinion, demonstrating Mikey's feelings. Now, personally, it bothered me a little bit at first seeing how cold Mikey was after Draken had just been pronounced dead, him being his closest friend, but then we genuinely get to see Mikey explode. Whilst although it's not in a giant burst of anger, it's this cold-hearted emptiness that he now feels, and I thought that was a genuinely powerful moment. Now, I'm not done yet, there's more we need to discuss, but to this point in the story while I was reading, I quite genuinely enjoyed it. I thought there was an extremely emotional moment with Draken's resolution as a character. We have this other antagonistic force who's extremely dislikable, and my investment in seeing him get his ass kicked is extremely high. And Mikey is, well, being Mikey. We're seeing the buildup of his character being fulfilled, and Takemichi's being Takemichi. What could be the issue? Because after this moment, we then get to see Mikey whoop Takemichi and put him in a 3-day coma, which then Takemichi wakes up from and shows a brand new conviction as a character, which then goes on to just confirm what I've always been saying about Takemichi. He's a character who inspires others and relies on others and puts his belief in them, and that draws people towards him, which then he goes to form his own gang. At this moment, I'm enjoying it even more. I'm excited. I'm glad to see all these characters band together. And then when he goes on to get Senju, one of the characters that was very prevalent during this entire confrontation, and one of the big new characters that would be introduced after the entire Kisaki confrontation, we then see her say that it's all her fault that Mikey and the other characters who are extremely prevalent are the way that they are. It's her fault, and she's been carrying this ginormous secret. Now, this is essentially the revelation and the origin of the dark impulses. The thing that caused Mikey to kill a man and put Takemichi, one of his closest friends, in a 3-day coma. Now, the chapter goes on, and we see them all as kids, and she has a toy plane. And, that toy plane gets broken. And, essentially it gets blamed on one of the other kids, and Mikey proceeds to beat the ever-living life out of him. He doesn't kill him, but he beats him up pretty bad. That's the origin of the dark impulse. I don't even want to cut this part out, because I just want it to be, okay, alright, look. So, remember what I told you to hold on to that piece of information of the dude who's, like, dark impulse awakened because he beat his own father to death at the age of 12? And now you expect me to believe that Mikey's origin for the dark impulse originated because of a toy plane being broken? Now, look, I understand that Mikey's a character who is very protective of the people that he cares about. That's something that's been prevalent throughout the entire series, and we know how he reacts to that. And I understand they're kids, and so, I mean, what could you really depict? Anything but that, actually. So it's this thing where I think Tokyo Revengers was actually going in a really solid direction. I was really enjoying what the manga was doing. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion, who knows, I don't care. But to have something that has been built up as the murderous impulse of Mikey, the thing that has been keeping him in the darkness and what has caused Takemichi to go back in time over and over and over again for, and then you present us with another character who beat his own dad to death. How do you expect us as the audience to genuinely believe this and take this seriously? The cause of conflicts and deaths, and you're trying to tell us that the origin of it was a broken toy plane? Now, maybe I'm just a simple-brained Puerto Rican, and this has some symbolic meaning in Japan that I know nothing of. Do toy planes have any sort of symbolic Buddhist interpretation that I don't know of at all? And so now I truly understand what the frustration, the outrage was about. All of this that has previously happened, these conflicts and all of this being pushed to murder, Draken was killed! And it starts with a toy plane. This is one of those cases where I think leaving the origin and the cause for an evil in a certain character to be left ambiguous. And I'm really hoping that in the next chapter we find out that this is I don't even know, bro. There's no amounts of copium that could justify this. Like, look, again, I actually quite enjoyed everything Tokyo Revengers was doing. And even though I would have preferred it to have ended with the Kasaki confrontation, I understand what has happened afterwards is necessary for what the author wants to do for the story. But this last chapter that's a rough one. That is a rough chapter. So again, to just sum up my personal thoughts, I thought some of the things that Tokyo Revengers had been doing in the last 40 or so chapters did actually have some really good moments in them. Some of the better moments in the series, I would argue. But I can understand the investment being low due to the introduction of all these new characters. But this last chapter is just, yeah, nah. If you are new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, all the other crap. And this has been the Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.